Hi there. Welcome to the Real Estate School of Nevada, Chapter 1 of the Pre-Licensing course. I am Allie Lopez. I'll be your instructor today. I want to give you a couple of tips before we get started. If you would put your phone in Do Not Disturb, that will help you pay attention to the material that I'm going to go over with you. And it'll give you focused time because pre-licensing is a lot of terminology, vocabulary, if you will. So I would recommend putting your phone in D&D just for 30 minutes. Of course, you can always pause these videos and go back and listen to more, but when you're focused, it definitely helps. And once you get your license, you're going to need to know how to put your phone in Do Not Disturb. So follow along with me. I will have the slides here for you. There is also a textbook that the Real Estate School of Nevada offers. If you haven't come down to purchase one, may I suggest doing so? Reading information, hearing information, writing down information, and then speaking it back to someone, like the study groups that we offer and the tutoring will help you retain this information. It's not just fluff. In the real world, when you're out here practicing real estate, these are things that you will need to learn, and it might not click with you right away your first year of real estate, but these terms come in helpful. Okay, so chapter 1, we're starting off, what is real estate? What defines real estate? What defines real property? And how it's created? Who is in charge of this? We are going to cover the differences between what personal property are and real property. I'm going to make sure you know what the bundle of rights of ownership are. We call that the deep C, and it's 5 important things. We're going to calculate the size of land described by the U.S. government rectangular survey. We're going to know the difference between a legal description and a non-legal description in a piece of property. We're going to remember and be able to explain the government controls on our private ownership of real estate. I know that sounds harsh, the government controls of our private ownership of real estate, but that comes down to taxation, zoning, security, and safety. It's not as crazy as you might imagine. We're going to learn the differences between monetary and non-monetary encumbrances. We're going to be able to distinguish what a dominant tenement is from a servient tenement. You probably won't see that a whole lot here in Las Vegas because we have so many pre-planned communities. This will come into play maybe if you have a family member or you're willing to buy some property out in a different county, not necessarily Clark County, or in the Midwest, and your piece of land can't be reached unless you go through somebody else's piece of land. That's a dominant and a servient tenement. We're going to be familiar with the concepts of zoning variances, non-conforming use, grandfathering. You guys are familiar with what grandfathering is. You've been in Las Vegas for any amount of time. And spot zoning. And do you know that you can overcome a buyer's objection to a common interest community and explain the benefits of living within the strict parameters of CC&Rs? So those are the topics that we're going to go over in chapter 1. Get your pencil sharpened. Here we go. I'm going to share the slides with you. Obviously, you can go back and read the slides yourselves. I'm not going to read the slide verbatim. I'm going to go over the material that's here in the book, which coincides with the slides. So let me share my screen with you. Here we go. Real property characteristics, legal descriptions, and property use. So obviously, land is defined as the surface of the earth. It extends upward to infinity in the airspace and downward to the center of the earth. And it includes all things that are attached to the surface, like trees and shrubs, and all things below the surface, like water and minerals. Water and minerals can turn out to be a really big deal for a lot of people when it comes to purchasing land. Maybe you guys have heard about all the controversy about the water restrictions here in Clark County and the digging of personal wells. This is a big deal. Real estate is defined as land plus its improvements, which are all man-made artificial things, building, fences, driveways, swimming pools, etc. What about farming implements? We'll get into that. Real property consists of the land, the man-made improvements, and the bundle of rights of the ownership. The difference in real property and real estate is the bundle of rights of the ownership. Okay, your bundle of rights consists of 5 things, and I like to remember it as deep C. So if you have a piece of paper, write DEEPC. The disposition, which means you have the right to sell, will, transfer, or dispose of the property. You have the right of exclusion, which means the right to keep others off of or from having access to your property. You have the right of enjoyment. You have the right to use the property in any legal way. Possession, you have the right to possess and occupy the property. And C, you have the right to control the property and use it for any legal purpose. There you go. So there are different classes of property. There's water rights. They may accompany ownership of the real estate. You could be buying a lakefront property, or an example I would say would be along the Virgin River up here in northern Nevada. You may have some rights to use that water, divert that water, but you'll find that out in the title chain. Riparian rights are rights of owners along a river or a stream. These are non-navigable bodies, and the owner typically owns the land under the water out into the middle. This is the Virgin River. On larger navigable bodies, owner only owns to the edge of the water. If you lived along the Mississippi River and barges were coming up and down for transportation, you could probably use the river for your enjoyment, but you don't have any rights to the water. You understand? Okay. Littoral rights. Owner's land borders large commercially navigable lakes, seas, and oceans, Lake Michigan, and the owners have claim only to the high water mark of water that borders their property. So littoral with the O, think of the ocean. Riparian, RI, think of rivers. There can be changes in the borders of all these water and places, and it's acts of nature. So accretion is when the property becomes larger where water has added to the land. So increases in land due to accretion belong to the landowner. So if you owned beachfront property in South Florida and the hurricane just came along and you had the rights of that beachfront, and the water actually created more beach for you because it came in, then you actually own more beach. Erosion is when any act of nature, wind, rain, or flowing water, has removed the land and replaced it with water. This would be many years ago along the Virgin River. We had really big flooding and hunks of land just fell in and were gone. So if you were along the Virgin River and a hunk of your land got washed away, sorry, it's gone. An avulsion is sudden removal of soil by an act of nature. The property becomes much smaller very quickly. I would think a landslide would be an avulsion example. Personal property is property that's not real property. It's movable. Anything from a potted plant, a tiny home on wheels, a manufactured home. Sometimes sheds are considered personal property because they're just on a slab. What's another great example of a piece of personal property? Salon chairs. Trees and crops that do not require cultivation. So if you have them out there for looks, not for farming purposes, those are real property. But fruit, vegetables, nuts, grasses, grains that are annually cultivated, implements or fructus industrials are personal property. A fixture is a different example. So a fixture is personal property that's been permanently attached to land or a building. They do become part of the real property. Lighting fixtures, alarm systems, heating systems, elevators, kitchen cabinets, pool equipment. A definition of a fixture can be controversial. In Las Vegas, 100%. They are always controversial. And courts have defined 3 legal tests: the method of annexation, the adaptation to the real estate, and the intention of the properties. So the method of annexation is, how was it attached? Was it attached to stay there forever, or was it attached as something decorative? The adaptation to the real estate, did it make that particular property different or better than how the property was before it was there? And the intention of the parties. Put it in writing. If your client likes a light fixture, ask for it in writing in your contract. Don't assume that it's going to stay. Ceiling fans, the same. Pool equipment. Trade fixtures on commercial spaces can be considered something a little bit different. If it's installed by a commercial tenant for the tenant's business, trade fixtures are personal property of the tenant, but if they decide to abandon them and leave them when their tenancy is over, then it becomes property of the landlord through a cession. Get that? Great. Okay. Okay, Shannon, when I held up this, obviously, you know that I'm thinking. Okay, so land has 2 different types of characteristics. They have the economic characteristics and the physical characteristics. The physical characteristics of land, it just means that the land is not immovable. It can change, it can morph, but you can't move this land and take it somewhere else. Land is considered indestructible. and it's considered unique. But the economic characteristics of land, and there will be a couple of really good questions on your exams about the difference between economic and physical, is that what makes this piece of land different from this piece of land? Always it's the location, the location, location. This piece of land here in Clark County is different than the piece of land in East Tennessee because of its scarcity. There's more land out west than there is back east. The improvements, if you put something on a piece of land that can generate income, could raise the value of that piece of land. And the permanence of the investment. Investments in land are usually long-term and relatively stable. He ain't making any more of it. So there you go. Okay. Now, this is going to be pretty good. Okay. Some of the other things that I want you to remember is there are 6 categories of real property, not real estate, real property. And you will be asked this on your test. There's residential, commercial, agricultural, industrial, mixed use, and special purpose. So residential real property is considered housing. Commercial real property is business properties, office space, and stores, strip malls. Industrial, warehouses and factories. Agricultural, farms and ranches, obviously. Mixed use is something that allows for more than one use. A good example of this is the Jewel downtown, Las Vegas. They have businesses on the bottom, condos from 3rd floor up, and special purpose, churches, schools, cemeteries, sometimes hospitals can be considered special purpose. There you go. Remember those categories of real property. Now, legal descriptions. Out west, we mostly use lot, block, and subdivision. If you are to look up your property on the recorder's website or the assessor's website, and you look at your deed, you'll see probably lot, block, and subdivision description. The government rectangular survey is how all land was established for the government to know where it is and how to tax it, okay? The earth is made up of prime meridians and latitude and longitude lines, and each of those will create boxes. And inside those boxes, when they intersect, are smaller boxes. And those smaller boxes equal the lot of land that you live on today. Okay, we'll go over the government rectangular survey in more depth in a minute. Meets and bounds is probably going to be seen more in the Boston area, more East Coast. It is literally a legal description from a starting point, a point of beginning, 15 paces west, 27 paces north, through east, 75 paces, south, 120 paces, and then west, 20 paces. Descriptive by paces and with a point of beginning. The old oak tree, the giant rock, you know, it could involve a natural object or a stake that somebody put in the ground 75 years ago. It's tough with a meets and bounds, and you'll definitely want to get a surveyor out and have the surveyor really mark off things for you if you're buying a piece of land that's being described by meets and bounds. Okay, so the government rectangular survey. Sorry. Okay. like I was telling you, the principal meridian and the baselines, these are the big things all the way around the earth. And each city, these are range lines, tiers and ranges. Las Vegas is broken down into these boxes as well. Each of these boxes is considered a township. A township is 6 miles wide by 6 miles high, okay? And in each township, there are sections. There's 36 sections per township, okay? The townships are numbered. The sections are numbered. So if this is township 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, okay, all the way to 36. And inside your township, the numbers are broken down as well, okay? So inside section 36, it's 1 mile wide by 1 mile high. And that can be broken down separately. Each section is 640 acres. You ready? Each acre is 5,000. Wait a minute. $200. No. Go back. Sorry, this is hard stuff. Okay. Each of the squares labeled 1 through 36 refers to a section of land. Boop, boop, boop. I'll use my mouth. To a section of land. And each section measures 5,000 feet, 5,280 feet on a side, and contains 640 acres of land. You get it? Each acre is 43,560 feet. 711. Okay, we'll do more math about this later. But that is what the legal description of a U.S. government survey is. Okay. Six miles apart, call the ranges of tiers. This. Oh, want us to do the math on it already. Okay. So how many acres are in the southwest half of the southwest fourth of section 15? The best way to figure out this math is if we know that this whole section is 640 acres, we don't need to know what we can start at the end of the problem and work our way towards the beginning. Instead of trying to figure out the southwest half of 640 by the southwest fourth of that answer by the southwest fourth, we're going backwards. So we're dividing 640 by 4, then this answer divided by 4, then this answer divided by 2. So the southwest half of the southwest quarter of the southwest quarter is 20 acres. We'll do more math on that. Okay, your legal descriptions that are, the final one is your lot, block, and subdivision. And like I mentioned, you'll see this description for most of your properties here in Clark County. It makes reference to an approved and recorded plat map for this subdivision, and it's the most common method. So on your title or in your deed, it'll say page 91 in plat book 33, lot 54, block 6. Pretty self-explanatory. All right, we talked about the government powers for your land. Here's the vague references to property and are not considered legal descriptions. You can use the vague references on contracts, but when it comes to recorded documents have to include the legal description. A contract is not considered a recorded document. A tax bill is not considered a recorded document. A tax lien is a recorded document. So you can include the property street address. You'll have those on your contracts, your tax assessor's parcel number, and these vague references are acceptable on documents that are not going to be recorded. Okay, while land is considered private, government and sometimes private individuals do have some control. So these are our governmental powers: police power, eminent domain, taxation, and escheat. So when it comes to police power, they have the government has the right to regulate for the benefit of the citizens. They control zoning regulations, subdivision regulations, building codes, health and safety regulations. Eminent domain. This is when the government has the power to take our provided property, provided that it passes test for public use. Payment of just compensation is met. I don't know if some of you have lived in Las Vegas very long, but 8 years ago, they needed to expand Interstate 15 down by the World Market Center, just right above the Charleston exit. And there were houses along the 15 down there. The government had the power to take those properties by eminent domain. They did relocate those homeowners. They did pay them for their properties, but they did have to take it from them in order to widen the 15. And I remember that was kind of a big project. The government has the power to condemn a property if it's been deemed unsafe, unhealthy, or dangerous. The payment is a condemnation award. Who wants one of those? Taxation is a governmental power, so it's revenue that's raised by the federal, state, or local government. Excuse me. You are taxed on your income. You're taxed on the value of the property owned or your business transactions. Another way that the county and the local governments can make money on taxation is what we call the real property transfer tax, the RPPT. Your title company can explain that to you a little bit more. And in the math section, I'll explain to you how to figure that out. The county takes recording fees, whether it's an e-recording or a paper recording. When they file your documents for everyone to see as public record, charges money. Property taxes, obviously, and special assessments. So a special assessment that the government could give us is if we are building a new expansion on the airport. So we're going to have Terminal 4. It's going to be built, and it needs special money. They might end up taxing us sales tax in some way, or raising our property taxes in Clark County to account for building that expansion on the airport. I believe there were special assessments for the Raiders. Special assessments taken for the Raiders, but don't quote me on that. Might be lies. Okay. The transfer tax. Here's some examples. Right here, it's normally paid by the seller, but remember, a transfer tax is normally paid by the seller. This is a negotiation item for future reference. Okay, if the transfer tax rate in the state is $2.55 per $500 of value or any portion thereof, the sale of a $300,000 home would result in a transfer tax of what? Okay, we have to find out how many units of $500 are in the $300,000 because each unit, each $500 value piece of value is going to be multiplied by the $2.55. So if we divide 300,000 as a whole, how many units of 500 are in 300,000? 600. Then we take that 600, which are the taxable units, and you multiply it by $2.55. So if the value of the home were $300,200, the calculation would be 300,200 divided by $500 of value, the units, and then it would be multiplied, rounded, and multiplied by the $2.55. I have to say rounding up is more common than rounding down in real estate. Recording fees. This is just an example. The state charge for recording documents in public records. The county might charge $14 for the first page of a document and $1 for each additional page. So a 24-page document would cost what to record? This might come into play for you, not just necessarily for a deed or a deed in lieu of foreclosure, but a trust. Your client might want to put their property in a trust or under an umbrella. And in order for that property to be recorded in the name of the trust, you might have to record all of 25 pages of the trust document. You might be able to help them figure out how much that's going to cost. Okay, property tax. This is where I wish I had my whiteboard and to show you. Actually, maybe I'll get, I think I will. So property tax is based on the assessed value, which is your land plus the improvements. The county assessor determines the value and informs the owner. And the state establishes an assessment ratio, which is an artificial lowering of the market value yielding the assessed value. Tax rate is applied against the assessed value. Okay. Let me get my whiteboard. Okay. When it comes to property tax, there is a two-part formula that you'll need to remember. And let me share that with you again. It's the market value. Now, market value is different than market price, okay? Write this down. Market value is different than market price. Market value is what the public would pay. It's a very generalization. It could be, the county can use a formula of 10 houses in the same neighborhood, all sold for anywhere between 250 and 325,000. So they could just add 250 and 325 and divide it by 2. That's what they consider to be the market value. Okay. So the market value is what the public would pay. The assessment ratio, which is the AR here on the screen, percentage is established by your county or your local tax people. Excuse me. So the assessment ratio in Clark County is 35%. So you multiply the market value by the 35%, and that will get what your assessed value is. Okay. Your assessed value, this is the second part, you have to multiply it by the tax rate. Okay. The tax rate is going to be described to you in lots of different ways. And you can check the tax rate for the tax part of town that you live in, your tax area, at the Clark County Treasurer's website. But it will tell you $3.10 per 1,000. It tells you how much of each of that $3.10 per $1,000 of home value goes to what? Goes to the fire station, goes to the libraries, goes to the schools, okay? So your tax rate is going to be different depending on what area of town you live in, what part of Clark County, but you multiply your assessed value by your tax rate, and that gets you your annual tax, okay? So we'll work through this problem together with my whiteboard, okay? The market value of a property is $360,000, $360,000. The assessment ratio is 35%. So our assessed value is what? And the tax rate in the taxing district for the home is $2.92.99 per $100 of assessed value. What are the annual taxes? Okay, so the solution down here, it shows us that 35% of $360,000 is $126,000. Now, how many units of 100, we just talked about this a second ago, how many units of 100 is in that $126,000? We found 1,260 units. Okay, the key factor is finding out how many units. In this example, it's $292 per $100 of assessed value. Some of the questions that you're going to get might be per $1,000 of assessed value. You might even see something that says there are 15 mills. Okay, if it says 15 mills, it means divide your assessed value by 1,000 and multiply it by 15. That's for the math chapter. Okay, so if there are 1,260 units of 100, then we're going to multiply that by $2.92.99. Okay, always add every bit of that decimal or you'll get the wrong answer. So the annual tax would be $3,691.67. Okay. Now, if your client is like, oh my gosh, $3,000 annually, how much do I have to pay per month? Divide by 12. Okay. If they want to know how much is that going to be if I pay every quarter, divided by 4. Semi-annually, divide by 2, and then you'll know. Okay. We'll do more questions on taxation. This is really, really helpful for you discussing things with clients. If they want to know what their potential property tax would be on a brand new construction, there you go. How's that? Okay. So sometimes when you buy into a common interest community, an HOA, things happen and they have to raise your per month payment, your HOA payment, for 6 months at a time to replace the gates, to repave the roads, to change out the lights in all of your street lights. Instead of using the orange ones, they might go to LED, and the HOA will get together and have a meeting and say, we are going to create a special assessment for 6 months. We're going to charge everybody in the neighborhood $40 extra per month for 6 months to cover all of our items. That is a special assessment. And once it's paid, once they get the money that they need, it's removed. So 6 months of $40 extra a month, it's satisfied, it goes away. Other places in order to create the sidewalks, to create the streetlights, landscaping of public areas, they take a bond out, borrow money, and let the new homeowner pay off that loan with the property. And these are called SIDS and LIDs. So each, well, shoot, okay. I thought there was a better explanation. A SID and LID in the community of Inspirata, for example. Each parcel has a balance owed to the city of Henderson for bringing out streetlights and paving. And my parcel might have a balance when I bought my property of $8,000. And my neighbor's parcel might, when they bought their property, might have a balance of 9,000 because their lot is a little bit bigger. Okay. I have to make quarterly payments to the city to pay off that SID and LID, and it could be $50. It could be $300. That balance, however long I pay it, reduces what I owe for the SID and LID. If I were to sell my property and move away, whoever buys my property buys the property knowing that there is a balance to the city of my SID or my LID for whatever is left. If I sell, I can absolutely pay off that SID and LID. If the new buyer comes along, they can pay it off when they buy the house. It stays with the property. Once the balance is paid off, it's paid off. They don't owe anything else. And it is a monthly fee. There's a lot of SIDs and LIDs in the valley. Okay, a sheet. All land needs to be owned by someone or some government entity. If a person passes away and does not have a will, or if they own real property but had left no will directing its disposal or transfer of title and had no heirs living at the time of their death, the government can take ownership of the property. If no taxes are being paid, the solution is the concept of a sheet where title to the property will pass to the state. This is where a will comes in really, really handy. Lots of questions on your test about a sheet. In some states, if the property was taken by a sheet and the deceased had a spouse living at the time of death, the property would pass to the spouse, although the spouse is not an heir, a person related by blood. If there are no heirs and no living spouse, and the state receives the property by a sheet, the property is sold and the proceeds of the sale are placed in the state fund. So sometimes you might go to a tax sale or a tax seizure sale. This is maybe an example of how that property got to that tax sale. All right, zoning ordinances are another way that the government has powers over property. Enabling acts. The general rule is that the regulation of the land within its borders is the function of the state. So, however, as time has passed and the population has spread, it became ineffective for the regulation of the use of land within the state to be done from the central state government. So by way of the enabling acts, the state government delegated its power to local governments, where decisions were made for the individual circumstances of a community. Remember, enabling acts. A master plan gives local government the ability to decide where and when things are going to be built for the area. They take into consideration the needs of the community, the potential of conflict between the uses, the orderly growth of the community, and the implementation of the master plan is accomplished by the zoning process. We have multiple master plan communities here in Clark County. Green Valley is a master plan community. Summerlin is a master plan community. Sky Canyon is a master plan community. Aliante, Inspirata, Cadence, Southern Highlands. So inside of all these master plans, somebody already dictated where the schools were going to be. The government dictated where the schools were going to be, where the grocery stores and commercial areas could be located, and the density of the housing. A variance is a request for a different use. It violates the zoning regulations. It's not a change in zoning. It is a waiver. So the example that they're using here, a family wants to add a room to their home, which would make the structure closer to the rear property line than the current 15-foot setback allows. They would need a variance to go forward with their plans for the addition. What is a setback? Homes usually have a setback from the property boundary that sets a minimum distance a structure must sit back from road or water, like fences, sheds, etc. You probably will have a client interested in purchasing a pool or building a pool at a certain time in their ownership. They might be interested in adding a casita in their backyard or a tiny home or a shed. You can guide them and help them figure out how much of a setback they'll need between their property line and the building of their pool, the building of their casita, the building of their tiny home, their shed. Okay, a conditional use permit. So zoning can't account for every potential use. If the intended use does not have a specific zone to be put, like a hospital, school, church, etc., and after a public hearing, if the use does not conflict with the surrounding area and the site would provide greater benefit than harm, then the conditional use permit could be granted. It's different from a variance in that it changes the zoning. So down near Water Street in Old Henderson, there have been some changes in the zoning from all residential. A couple of people have gotten conditional use permits that change the zoning to allow for multifamily across the street from single family residential. It's just grown so big down there, and the need for housing is huge. So it's a different process than a variance. A buffer zone is something to keep in mind. These are required separations between conflicting areas, and they are often an area of land zoned for use that smoothly transitions from one use to another. So as an example, a housing development is separated from a commercial shopping center by a park. We've seen this all over town. Or a school is separated from a bar by a minimum of 1,500 feet. In each case, the buffer zone provides separation from conflicting uses and promotes life safety and the general welfare of the community. Okay, a buffer zone isn't necessarily space between the highway and the residential area. It really means space between two different zoning areas. Spot zoning represents the zoning authority's decision to rezone an area, different from surrounding parcels. Mom's Beauty Shop wants to operate a home-based business in a residential zone. She will need to get the zoning board's permission to do so. Oh, there we go. Up zoning or down zoning. If additional uses are added to those already available for a property, this is considered an upzone and would normally add value to the property. If uses which a property already had are taken away, this would represent a downzone and may reduce the value of the property. Downzoning would be considered a taking under eminent domain, thus requiring compensation to the property owner who's lost value due to the down zone. And up zone, I don't have a really good definition for you on that one. Okay, so those were the governmental uses and powers. Where did our little list go? Now, private controls of a property. turn out to be all of these things. This is a lot on one slide, okay? Okay. Private control of land is really, this is a lot on your screen. There are encumbrances. There are monetary encumbrances and there are non-monetary. So without looking at this, encumbrances create a burden on the title to the property, and while benefits can be derived, they may obstruct the use or the value, okay? The use of the, I have to go back, I'm sorry. So a monetary encumbrance could be the mortgage on the house, well, what we call a mortgage. It's a deed of trust, mostly here in Nevada. A property tax lien, a mechanics lien, a general lien, a lis pendens, a writ of attachment, and a writ of execution. So the lis pendens, a writ of attachment, and a writ of execution all have to do with the court system. And a judge determines and will help you with all of these. A property tax lien, obviously, if you're not paying your property taxes, then the county can file something against your title that says if you go to sell, guess what? The county's going to get their tax money. A mechanics lien is also the same. If you had work done on your property and you didn't like how they completed it and you want them to fix it before you pay them, but they feel like they did exactly all the things, they can file a mechanics lien against your property until they get paid. If you were to ever sell the property, then they would be paid. A general lien is once a person has sued another in court and has obtained a final judgment. In order to collect on the judgment, it is often necessary to file the judgment in the public records, which then creates a general lien against all of the property the judgment debtor owns in the jurisdiction. Okay, that's a general lien. A lis pendens means it tells a title company and it tells anybody involved in your real estate transaction when they do a title search that there is an active court case going on with somebody whose name is attached to that property. So things are still pending with this active court case that could result in somebody being owed money. So if they wanted to sell, red flag, they might be trying to sell so they don't owe me money. You need to file the lis pendens. According to the textbook, it says, sometimes an aggrieved party wants to file a lien, but cannot do so because the lawsuit is still in process. Should the plaintiff discover that the owner is trying to sell the home, which will likely make the attachment of a lien useless, the plaintiff may consider a lis pendens, which means lien pending. Placed in the public records, the lis pendens gives notice that litigation is pending concerning the property, and a lis pendens tends to prevent the property from being sold or transferred before the dispute is resolved. There you go. You will be asked this question on your test. What is the difference between a writ of attachment and a writ of execution? If the plaintiff in a lawsuit believes the defendant is disposing of his assets to avoid a possible judgment, he's dumping his property before his court date, so he can say he doesn't have any money to pay you, the plaintiff may seek a writ of attachment from the court. If the court agrees, the court will issue the writ, which has the effect of preventing the transfer of the assets until the lawsuit is concluded. Writ of attachment. Writ of execution. If the plaintiff in a lawsuit obtains a final judgment against the defendant, the plaintiff may request a writ of execution to assist in the collection of the judgment. The court will issue the writ of execution to the sheriff, which directs the sheriff to seize all property of the defendant in the jurisdiction, sell it, and apply the proceeds against the judgment. That's pretty serious stuff right there. Okay, those are monetary encumbrances. Specific, general. Non-monetary encumbrances restrict how you can use the property and are said to run with the land, meaning the use restriction passes to the new owner when the title is transferred. So your HOA rules and regulations is an encumbrance. It's a non-monetary encumbrance, but it says how high your shed can be. It says how wide your driveway can be. It says what color your garage door and what color you're allowed to paint your house. Okay. The conditions, covenants, and restrictions: no parking on the street. Guests must have a permit. The deed restrictions are going to be, you can't build 5 stories high in this neighborhood. Okay. And you have to agree to these rules before moving in. Easements, licenses, and encroachments. An easement is the right of someone other than the owner to use part of the property for a specific purpose. Every property that has electric, gas, and water has an easement to allow the gas company to come and check the meters, the water company to come and check the meters, or the electric company to come and check their panels. Okay. That's an easement by necessity. An easement by a pertinent easement. Here we go. An easement by necessity can also be enforced by a judge. A pertinent allows one to cross over the land of the other. Remember at the beginning of the chapter, I talked about if you end up buying land in West Tennessee and you can't get to your parcel of land without crossing over somebody else's parcel, this is an easement appurtenant. It's land over which right to cross is the servient tenement. The land which enjoys the right to pass is the dominant tenant. Okay, so this is your land that's surrounded by everybody else's. And in order to get to the marketplace, the fastest and easiest way to get there is to go across Bob's land. Bob is the servient tenement. Doesn't mean that you own this piece of Bob's land. It's that he's given you an easement to use. He can still pave it if he wants. He can make it concrete. He can make it gravel. He can put flowers on it. You cannot put flowers on it. You cannot pave it. You cannot make it gravel. The use. All right. Easement in gross is simply just the right of the passage. It's not a dominant tenement. It's only a servient tenement. And the most common examples are utility easements. We talked about that. An easement by prescription is seldom seen in modern times. It's one party's conspicuous use of another's property, a prescribed long period of time without permission. It would have to be continuous and hostile, and the court order granting an easement by prescription. I think the example that I always heard was in order for kids to get to school back in the old farm days, they had to cut through Farmer Bill's cornfield to get to school. It saved them 45 minutes of walking or something like that to get to the back of the school instead of staying on the street and walking on the gravel road. And it was an easement by prescription. All right. In general, easements are created by granting or reserving in a deed, showing a landlocked condition to obtain easement by necessity, taking an easement by a public entity through condemnation, court order, continued long-term conspicuous and hostile use resulting in an easement by prescription, mostly deeds here in Clark County. Easements are terminated by abandonment, released by the easement holder, sometimes known as a quitclaim deed, which is a recorded document that says, I no longer need to use Bob's property to get to my property. The street has been constructed, so I release Bob of the servient tenement by court order or by merger. Sometimes properties go together and they only need one electricity box or one gas meter. You can close off the others, don't need to get to them. The easement holder buys the land over which the easement runs. This doctrine of merger says you cannot have an easement over yourself, thus terminating the easement. So sometimes instead of having a granted deed, or if it's not recorded on a piece of paper with your title, sometimes it's just called a license and you get to use it for however many years. It's giving permission to come on the land for a specific purpose. It's a privilege and it can be taken back. Encroachments now are different, but they sometimes do create encumbrances. It's a thing that extends over the property line without an owner's permission. It can be a building or portion thereof. It could be driveways, fences, walls, trees, shrubs. So many trees create encroachments here in Clark County. So many roots create encroachments. So many neighborhood fights over trees. So encroachments can be buildings or portions thereof. Methods to remedy encroachments. Sometimes it's a friendly conversation and a negotiation agreement of all the parties. Sometimes it's the removal, either by agreement or by court order, of the tree or the building or the fence. Sometimes it's a suit for damages by the property owner being encroached upon. Utilization is an agreement or a court order allowing the encroached upon party to have the benefit and use of the thing that's encroaching. I wish I had a good example for you about that. Maybe the fig tree, I get to eat the figs. Or the suit for easement by prescription. So if the encroachment has existed for the length of time required by the state statute and has been visible and continuous, the encroaching party may be allowed to either claim an easement exists, or under the concept of adverse possession, the easement and the encroachment was forced upon them, they may be successful in a claim of ownership of the limited piece of land which is subject to the encroachment. You will see back east a lot of properties were created bigger because of encroachments. All right. So that concludes chapter 1. Thank you for your attention. Take your quiz. Go back and remember your bundle of rights. Remember all the ways that land can be created and removed because of weather and natural things. Remember the governmental powers. Remember the police, taxation, the sheet. Remember the 5 types of property: residential, commercial, agricultural, industrial, special use, mixed use. Good luck, and we'll see you on chapter 2. Thanks for hanging in. See you next time.